it's showtime, Denise.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. So Matt is here. Where's Matt? There he is.
Hello.
So Matt Roberts and Denise Holland are our wonderful guests today. And this being the first of the year, we're kind of shifting gears with our podcast. All since last May when we began the Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane podcast, I was just interviewing people who were in the book, people who had a story in the book. And I didn't interview everybody, but I interviewed a really good broad selection of people. And that was great. So that was kind of our phase one. And we're now moving into phase two with the podcast. So we'll just be meeting every third week of the month, third Tuesday of the month. So that's our new schedule. And we're meeting with people who are not in the book, but who have been impacted by the book, or who are should have been in the book, but didn't get included in the book. So, a lot of our podcasts have centered around things like addiction and mental health and school systems and areas where people have problems. So this podcast will be unique in another way, in that it's not about an area of problems, but an area that inspires us. Sport, athletics, high performance activities. We love them because they allow us to see people transcending their limitations. People operating in what we call the zone when something magical happens. Something I know I love many sports. I love fly fishing. As you can see by my shirt today, I've got my Fly Fishing for the Mind shirt on. But I love rock climbing. I love downhill skiing. Lots of things. And what I love most about them is when I let go of my thoughts about what I'm doing. When I'm able to be in that moment, in the zone. We call it being in the zone in athletics. Those are the magical moments that are peak experiences. Sometimes literally, if you're on a mountain, it's a peak experience. And those are the moments as fans of athletics that we love to watch. When someone does something that's never been done before, or comes from behind to win the game against all odds. There's something in athletics that really kind of paints us into a corner, forces us to, no matter how many great skills you might have as an athlete, if your thinking, your mind is in the way, you get insecure, you get caught up in your thoughts, you feel under pressure, you feel anxiety, that interferes with your body's natural ability to be in the zone. So that's what our two coaches are going to share with us today, how they teach the principles, the three principles of the psychology to high performance professional athletes. Denise is a coach, and I'll let her fill in her resume a little bit more, but she's been the coach for the national netball team of Scotland. I don't know what netball is, but I assume it's something like basketball. You call it football. We call it soccer here with a lot of different uses of the word. But she's worked with many amateur as well as professional athletic teams and is an extraordinary coach. And she'll talk about how when she discovered the three principles, how that changed her coaching, how that enhanced what she does. And Matt, who I don't know, I've never met until today, has a background as a high performance athlete, was, I don't know if you were an alternate for the Olympic team in the UK in track and field as a high jumper. I tried high jumping, but I was too short in high school. But he has a personal story to share as well about how this understanding of the three principles has helped him as an athlete and also as a coach. So I'd like to just share just a little story before they introduce themselves. Like I said, I've always loved being outdoors, whether it's skiing, cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, rock climbing, fly fishing, lots of different things, because just because I love to be outdoors in nature, as many of us do. There's something about being in nature that brings us into the moment, that relaxes us. Our thoughts seem to fall away when we're fascinated by the beauty that we're seeing. And so many, many years ago, before I knew the three principles, before I met Sid Banks, I would do courses on rock climbing and take people out on rock climbing and mountain climbing adventures to help them understand the relationship between their thinking and their ability to get over their fears, to be able to climb. And it was a wonderful metaphor for helping people to see their thinking in the moment. Because when you're caught up in your thinking as a climber, it just looks like glass that you're trying to climb. And when you're in the zone, when you're in the moment, when your mind is clear, you see the perfect pathway forward. As a matter of fact, we used to blindfold people. This is a cruel little exercise that we did when they were climbing to help them see without seeing. Because when you look at a rock, it looks like it's just like granite, a granite slab. But when you feel the rock, you feel all of the little subtle handholds and footholds, and your hands see more than your eyes, because your eyes tend to make things up about what you're seeing. So this was a way of kind of tricking people into seeing how much their thinking got in the way of their ability to climb the mountain. And later, I took the same kind of idea to. I had gone to hear Sydney Banks in British Columbia many years ago, and my good friend George Patterson introduced me to fly fishing. And it was with Ken Spittle, Elsie Spittle's husband. The three of us went fly fishing. And it was on that first night after catching my first trout on a fly rod that we dreamed up the idea of fly fishing for the mind, where we took people on retreats all over the world, taught them through the seminars in the evening and in the morning about the principles and how their mind worked. And during the day, they would fly fish. And it was just a wonderful way for people, when they weren't thinking about their problems, they were learning something that they really wanted to do and loved. It was a great way to help them to have insights about seeing how their thinking would interfere with their ability to cast the fly rod. For example, if you really know how to cast a fly rod, but you see a large brown trout jump out of the water and you go, oh, I got to get it. And you try to, with all your effort, target that fish, your urgency, your fear of missing it, all of that gets in the way of your body's natural ability in knowing to cast that exactly right where you need to. So it was a beautiful way to teach people about the principles. They had fun, it was relaxing, they had a vacation, and they learned a lot. So sport is a wonderful way to discover what we don't know about the principles and put into practice what we do know. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Denise first. And Denise Holland, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more? And
yeah, so thank you, Joe, for being here. And yeah, I wish I was on that fly fishing trip.
fly fishing for the mind, yeah.
So yeah, I'm Denise Holland. I run a business to help people, in individuals, businesses, teams. I started out working in the field of sport because that's the industry I've been in. But I realized that actually I can just share this with anyone. So, but my background has very much been for the last 30 years in human performance in sport. I played as an athlete in the World Championship in 1991 and again in 1995. And I switched areas of the court. So it's like basketball, but you can't run with the ball and there's no backboard and the ball is smaller. So I learned to shoot, and I had an absolute torrid time of being an athlete. And so fast forward, I then became a national coach, and I had a much easier time of being a national coach, I have to say, and it felt more fluid. But it wasn't until 2013 that I, by chance, came across the principles. And for me, I had an epiphany, complete transformation, and it just connected the dots. It just helped me to see how all those years ago, there were times where I felt as if I was on automatic and in that beautiful optimal zone, and I didn't have to work so hard at the performance. And then there were times where my skill capacity was nowhere to be seen. And all of those thousands of hours were just wasted because I couldn't access them. And when I came across the principles, it helped me to see, oh, that's what was going on. And now I can, in my own life, I can switch, I can avoid a spiral of adversity, and I can come back to balance. And I help my athletes to do the same, so that they have access to 100% of their skill capability, and more. And that's what I love when you were saying, Joe, that when it allows people to go through boundaries and beyond limitation, it's anything is possible at that point. And so that's what I help people to do now, not just in sport, but in all performance teams and at all levels of the game. So even local club level, young people, right through to national honors.
Wow. So, Denise, can you share a little bit from a personal level when you're engaged in an athletic event yourself, not just coaching someone, that were in the moment you were able to drop into that zone, or you dropped out of the zone and you realized the thinking getting in the way? Do you have any personal stories that come to mind for you about that?
Yeah, I mean, I wished I'd had this understanding when I was an athlete. And of course, I only came across it 9 years ago. So my athletic days by that time were gone. But it's interesting. I actually played netball just before Christmas, much to my better judgment, and I had the opportunity to be back on the court it's just a local game, but to be back on the court shooting the ball from this understanding, and to have the experience of those usual thoughts of panic and fear, is it going to go in? Am I going to let the team down? And am I good enough? And am I just a bit too old here to be playing? And to allow just to have the sense that I didn't need to take any notice of those. I didn't need to go with that thinking, because profoundly I know what it is, and that it's optional. It's not inevitable given the circumstance. So I can just fall out of that. And I had this beautiful experience of just being able to shoot. And I haven't been on the court in 25 years. And I was just putting the ball up, and it was just going through the net, swish, one after another. And I was so delighted by the opportunity, because I didn't have this when I was an athlete. And then I just managed to be in the situation where I could experience the flow that I now talk about and teach as a coach with my athletes. So the difference was just so effortless. And I struggled so much as an athlete to be able to do that. And no amount of thinking and trying to work it out got me there. In fact, it just got worse.
So if you could have conversation with the younger Denise when she was an athlete and you got to
Mm.
coach her, what would you say to her now, given what you've realized and what you know? What would you say?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would, and when I'm working with athletes now, especially the young people, is I really help them to see how natural it is for us to be able to move, and how natural it is for us to be able to execute movement. And one of the things that we do is, I ask them to just walk, and they would walk around the courtyard or the sports hall. And I said, how much thinking are you having around walking? And they would say, well, none. I said, well, why don't you just shoot in the same way? Once you have a skill and you've mastered the skill, it it can just be the same as walking, and you'll just continue to fine tune it, because obviously your body grows and changes, but that it doesn't need you to have to think about it to execute it. Just the naturalness of our body is like we're breathing. Are you doing that? No. Well, it's just helping them to tune in that there's an intelligence that's behind the system that's making that work for you, and that you don't need to control it, you don't need to manage it, and that it's there for us innately. And that for me is just seeing that performance can just flow through us. It's very like babies just learn to walk and talk naturally. They don't have to have limb finding lessons. They just turn over, roll and find. And if I can help my athletes to tune into that innate capacity of learning and the resilience to know what to do next, which is natural, then they don't get so scared. I wouldn't have been so scared if it wasn't up to me, if there was something else that was happening. I thought it was up to me.
I
And I
just,
realized
yeah,
it wasn't.
I just love what you said about how we're designed,
Mm.
how we're naturally designed to walk, to breathe, to do all these things. And once you've trained yourself in a sport, how to throw a ball or how to hit a baseball with a bat or whatever your sport might be, a puck with a hockey stick, there's a skill level that you get. But once you have that, because you love the game, because you're curious, because you want to be better, you learn very quickly. Then something takes over that's natural. But it sounds like that our thinking can get in the way of that natural zoneness, if you will. I'm
Yeah.
Keith Blevins, who's right below you in the box here. We're kind of sharing a grandson with him. He's got his daughter Maddie, who's our goddaughter, has a new baby, Leland, and every day we get videos of Leland in the first 6 months of life, which is the highlight of my day, by the way. I don't know if it is for you. I'm sure it is for you, Keith. But what I'm amazed at is how quickly he's learning so many things. He's so curious. Every time he does, like when he stood up in the crib the other day, he just giggled and giggled and giggled. Oh my God, he doesn't have language yet, but I'm standing, or I'm turning this wheel. It's like his natural, uh, designed in propensity of curiosity evolves him to learn hundreds of things already to his delight. It's not, oh, what am I going to be graded, or am I going to win, or it's none of that thinking. It's just joyful exercise of curiosity. And when athletes that I've watched who love the game, who just love the game, they're so happy just to be doing it and grateful. And those are the ones that seem to me to really excel, rather than ones that are so hard on themselves or perfectionistic about it. And for me, the principles, Leland was born knowing the principles. We have to unlearn them. We have to cover them up with fear and insecurity. So with athletes or with kids or with anybody in life, with myself, is simply recognizing, like if I'm at the top of a mountain, like we're going skiing in Utah on Friday, uh, uh, at one of the most advanced ski resorts in the country. So there's all these black diamonds, and every time, I haven't been in a couple of years because of COVID, but when I haven't been skiing in a while and I'm at the top of that black diamond, it's like, oh my God, do I know how to do this anymore? But it doesn't take too long of skiing before I'm into that joy of it again and into that. And then I flow into the natural rhythm of, because I know how to ski. I've been doing it since I was 14. But when my thinking gets in the way, it becomes frightening and I fall, make mistakes. So anyway, I loved how you talked about that. And I'd love to pass the ball, metaphorically speaking, here to Matt. If you've been inspired to share anything about what you've discovered for yourself as an athlete and as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I had goosebumps when you started sharing about our potential as as athletes, as sports people. That really is probably my driving force, really, which I think is the reason why I'm sat here now. So for me, I was an international high jumper, but at age 19, I was possibly one of the worst high jumpers in the country. I really wasn't very good. I didn't make any age group championships. But was fortunate enough to find a coach who kind of saw my potential, and I improved 10 centimeters to like a bit over 3 inches in 2 weeks of training with him. So I was like, oh wow, and it was this sort of first experience for me of the effortlessness of things clicking. And I think because I wasn't very good as an athlete, kind of compared to sort of peers and nationally and the rest of it, then it was very apparent to me that for me to reach my potential, to see how good I could be, I needed to exploit every avenue. And for me, I was like, see, well, clearly mindset makes a big difference. So it started this whole journey throughout my career to explore that and understand that and find that kind of missing ingredient. And I look at every single personal best that I had, all of these moments of peak performance, and they just stood out. I could give so many words which describe this experience of flow state, which I think we've all heard many different times from so many different angles. And it resulted in me jumping 2 meters 26 at my best, which is about a foot above my head. And that's a couple of centimeters short of what won the Olympics medaled at the Olympics 2 years later. And unfortunately for me, I ruptured a disc in my neck. Had an accident high jumping, and it was a sort of long recovery back. Eventually jumped 225, and it was near the end of my career that I discovered the principles. And it's funny, throughout my career, I looked to meditation, visualization, so many different techniques, even as to why I performed at my best when I did. And even at one point, I believed that I performed at my best when I did because I held my hands above my head. Yes.
Superstition.
Completely. Yeah. And it's, and I think it then just discovering the principles, really sort of discovering discovering the truth for myself about who I am, how I am made, beyond kind of personality, all these kind of superficial things, just what a human being is, how we work, and experiencing that, well, actually I am exactly the same as everybody else, beyond all our differences. And, you know, it's like one of those moments of just kind of palm in the face kind of thing, because it's like, oh my God, every single time I was looking outwards, I was, you know, well, I performed well because of that. I had a tailwind that day, or I kind of felt good, you know, like just absolute nonsense, absolute nonsense. Yeah, just saying that, oh, well, when I literally got out of my own way, or this or that happened, then I was naturally confident. There wasn't anything that I needed to do. And in fact, when I didn't engage with the noise of my mind, my technique was perfect. And, you know, really, it's when it kind of gets down to it, is why I now coach people, because it's what's always excited me. But, well, actually, what is possible for a human being? We don't know. Because even if we, you know, it's and it's so common with it for athletes, is that, you know, they train with other people, they have peers or competitors, and it's like, well, they look at all the individual parts of training and they go, well, I'm good at this, better at that, and then you almost kind of, without realizing, subconsciously or even verbally outwards, you know, coaches will rank people, you know, almost say, oh, well, I think you're capable of doing this, and then straight away we limit what we're capable of doing.
That reminds me, Matt, excuse me a second here, just to interrupt. When I was in high school and I was in track, did the low hurdles and the 220 and a few things like that. But there was an athlete, and I can't remember his name right now, but everyone thought that the 4-minute mile was that somehow humanly impossible for people to go a mile running in under 4 minutes. And who was the guy that broke the record? First, who knows that?
Bannister?
Who?
Roger Bannister.
Roger Bannister, an Englishman, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when right after he broke that record, it was replicated all over the world. And it shows the power of thought in limiting our potential and what we can do. But that was such a graphic example. It was like everyone thought it was impossible, and then he did it. And then it was like, oh, if he can do it, then I can do it. It's not impossible. So that's a recognition of a limited thought removes the barrier of that thought to move beyond your limitations. So that was one thing that I keyed in on. The other thing that you said, Matt, that I loved was that your coach saw your potential beyond what you saw in yourself, because you were an average athlete before you had that coach. And I'm a coach for addiction and mental health and marriages and things like that. So we're a different kind of coach, but the biggest power I have is not just to give lip service to people's capacity to change and to evolve and to transform, but to see that in them. And a good coach, I think of Ted Lasso. I don't know if anybody knows who Ted Lasso is. Anyway, that's a TV show that's about a great American football coach who gets hired in England to work with an English football team. And he knows nothing about the rules or anything about it. But he knows about this. He knows about heart. He knows about the power of the mind. And he, transforms this team into this wonderful football team. And that's, but his whole thing is seeing beyond what they could see themselves doing, believing in them, and then them believing in themselves. So I'd love to hear from either of you or anybody in the group now. We can open it up to questions, but if either of you have anything you want to share around those two things, seeing the potential in people who are athletes and seeing beyond your own limitations, how that shift changes you or the people you work with.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly, because you
Sure.
mentioned my coach, and Yeah, I have to give him complete kudos, and the fact that I wouldn't have had a career without him. And he's, you know, arguably one of the best at what he does in the world, and is an absolute visionary. And in fact, I was probably a great hindrance so much of the time to my own progress, because I couldn't see what he could see. And, you know, to sort of tie back in what you both said, is that there's so many points where I thought it was on me, that I had to, you know, I had to make it happen. And, you know, and all of that engagement with the noise was just such a detriment to performance. So that's where, you know, I now see, you know, working with the athletes that I get to work with, that, you know, when they catch on to this, and I'm always trying to point back towards what is just so natural to them. Because there's always an area in someone's life where they excel and they have moments of grace, and tap into just what is, you know, what is our birthright that, you know, they haven't covered up yet. And I know that if they can bring that to the realm of athletics, then they will perform so much better.
That's lovely, Matt. And what came up for me is that in my coaching as a sports coach now, the way I show up is so different, because in my old days, I would show up with myself as the expert, as the coach, as the expert with all the knowledge and the experience with my athletes. Whereas now I show up as one. I show up as a human being first and foremost. And yes, I have knowledge and experience about the game, but I also know that where performance comes from is the same in them as it is in me. And so I really now, it's changed the way I coach, because I speak to, as you said, I speak to the health in them, but I speak to the possibility, the infinite possibility in them, the infinite potential and creativity in them. And before, I didn't have eyes for that. I was trying to, if you like, help them to play the game in the way that I thought it should be played based on my experience and knowledge. And how often do you hear that courtside on any sport, rather than, and here's my biggest change, which I've really noticed, is let's see what's possible. Let's be explorers of human performance through these physical bodies and minds, and let's see what's possible. Exactly what Matt was on. And I now ask and help coaches to help them to coach in a way which is from their security and their health and their resilience, rather than their insecurity, because many coaches will believe that the results of the team says something about them as a human being, and it doesn't. And they will continue to get anxious and stressed when their team isn't performing, and that isn't helpful. Yet it looks like it's the most natural thing in the world. And of course, in professional sport and in, you know, and in elite sport, as I was, if your team doesn't perform and doesn't hit those targets, you're on the risk of getting sacked. You know, you're out of the door. So it's a no wonder coaches and managers get caught in the trap of losing their connection to who and what they really are as a spiritual being, having this human experience. It's often said in this work, and the complete infinite potential in that to perform. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing now, is I'm helping coaches to coach from a place of security, not from their fearful thinking, from their gratitude, their resilience, their compassion, and the oneness that they are, or the coming from the same place and same space as their athletes are. And it's really helping because people are staying in the game as coaches. And before, there was a big move out of coaching because it was so stressful. Well, what if we can have a sustainable sports coaching workforce in the future, because we have all these secure people that are connected to their innate mental health? It's going to completely transform the world of sports coaching.
Wow. Well, thank you guys both so much. I'd like to open it up now, because people may want to ask you questions or comment on the insights they had from listening to you. So I see our friend Nikon from Thailand, his hand up. Here you go, guy. You're up. You're up to bat.
Yeah,
as we say.
this is definitely worth staying up for at 2:30 a.m. So
this guy just sleeps. I swear to God,
I don't sleep. 3 p.m. So firstly, thank you everybody. Thank you, Joe, for bringing these amazing people on. Like when I saw athletics, I had to be on because as a recovering professional athlete, I was a taekwondo player, a combat sports person. Everything you guys were saying, I was like, yep, that was me. Yep, like I just learned so much. And true to support what both of you were saying is I played my best when I was closer to retiring because I didn't care so much about the results.
Wow.
And it was so fun. I won a national title at 33, which is way too old for combat sports. I'll never forget it. The national team coach, because you line up all the medalists and they're like, you have to put your name and your age. You're like 19, 16, 21, 33. He's like, look back, who's 33? I was like, right here. and
Wow.
it came at the tail end when I discovered the principles. And I guess my question to you both is, in being more aware of my thinking, there's so many habitual things from my sports career that I see are so unhelpful now. And I think it's specifically to do with the way I approach things I want. I think you guys know what I mean. Like as an athlete, the way you're taught to approach something that you want is you grind and you grit and you put up and you deal with the pressure. And I realize now that's so unhelpful as an adult in approaching relationships or work or career or money. And it's really hard for me because I don't often catch it. I only catch it when I have so much pressure on it. I have so much on it already. I'd love if you could speak to that how like so much of our bad habits as athletes translates into normal life, and what's been your experience of that, if that makes sense.
Either one of you want to take a stab at that one?
I'd love to.
Go for it, Matt.
Thanks. Just because what I kind of heard a bit in Denise speaking before, and then in what you're saying, Nikon, because I had a huge insight over the last year, because part of my background as well as I'm a trained artist, fine artist, and it was staring me in the face for years. How the answers that I was looking for. So I spent 3+ years in a studio with 1 hour contact time a week, and so I understood creativity, and I intuitively understood for years that, well, if I need the answer to something, I just give it space, and I'll have an idea, it will come. And it reliably does. I just 100% knew, but I never realized I could apply that to athletics. I could apply that to business. And I always thought that my conception of me, I needed to make things happen. Yeah. And I'm still at the kind of just at the sort of cusp of seeing this now, is that like, well, no, you know what? When I just get quiet, and when I allow space, something emerges. The answer, what I'm looking for, or the inspiration of the idea, and I've just witnessed it in myself and kind of macro the last 3 months of like, oh, I would have got really busy around that. Like I had a dip in some clients, and like in the past, I would have engaged in all of that and got really busy. I would have got my fingers stuck in, and I would have done what I did most of my high jump career and messed it up. And so for me, what I'm hearing and seeing is just the value in space, because then we allow what's already there, is our design to work in how it should work. And out of that, that's, for me, that's when magic, you know, I can only kind of put it down to magic, kind of, and our infinite potential comes from. You know, if you keep filling the cup.
Yeah. You know, thanks for that. I'm making a whole YouTube thing about that, so you can't. I'm doing it first, but you know, I really appreciate what you shared. I really felt it, and I don't know if both of you resonated. Like, I remember competing, and you could just tell it was that guy's day. You know what I mean? Like, it was really just that person's day to win it, and you were so happy for that person because it was their day. And it goes back to the thing of having less on your shoulders and less on you. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that I reflect in what you're sharing is there's so much less on my shoulders, even the gold medal. And when it was my turn, it was my turn. And when it wasn't, it wasn't. And that was totally okay. And I really appreciate that insight, Matt. And thank you for the space, Denise. I appreciate that too.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but I've got something that I could add to that. Is it James or is it
Nikon.
James? Yeah,
James.
It's Nikon rather than the James. Yeah, and it's something that you said right at the beginning was I won my first medal when I didn't really care so much, and what I hear in that is that you already had seen that when you don't have a lot on it, i.e. your need for it or your want for it is less, and it's not personal. It's actually coming from a more impersonal space of inspiration and curiosity and fascination. And for me, my barometer is my feeling state, because if I check in with how much do I want this and how much have I got on the way it needs to be done, then you know what, like Matt says, that's going to cause a lot of head noise, and that for me is heading in the wrong direction. So I check in on my need, and I let the outcome be whatever it's going to be, and it generally goes way better than Denise could ever have imagined it to be.
Yeah. Can I add something to that? Because I really I saw something. It's so important what you're saying, because, and as athletes, you both know that what you're saying is totally true. And it's the hardest thing to see when you're on court and people are yelling at you, and everybody else has something on it. Everybody else and their mother has something on it. I remember I got up on stage to fight this kid, and this other kid's mom was there like, Nikon's a butthead, you know, keeping this PG just for Joe. Like, this Nikon's like the biggest butt. I'm like, I don't even know you, lady, but I have to still have to beat up your son, you know, like. But it's so that's why your work is so important, I think, is just to keep that space despite everybody else's thinking on you. Yeah.
Ellen, you've had your hand up there. Thanks, Nikon, for your insight.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. You know, I know these principles are universal, but it's really fun to listen to a topic that you have no interest in and hear so deeply the universality of these principles.
Wow.
That's what's happening to me, because I personally and professionally as a coach, this is just not an area that I would, you know, would do anything with. So, but that said, Denise, you said something that perked my interest. And of course it just slipped away, but hold on.
That's a good way that it works. You're demonstrating it right now.
So when you're, you know, you point people to the possibilities, right? And so this understanding points people to the infinite possibilities. And then as someone who gets so excited about infinite possibilities, as someone who knows potential through my own experience and the hundreds of people that I've worked with and coached, then it's like this space of letting them find it for themselves. And I'm just curious, like both of your or all of your anyone's reflections on that, right? Because, you know, when I share something with someone, I see, they get it intellectually, but they don't get it. They don't get it until they get it, right? And so I'm just wondering, your reflections on that, if I'm clear.
Yeah, I can go because I would, in my coaching, I'd be so excited and so inspired by what's possible for people. But here's the thing, I saw early that it's not in my domain when people get to wake up. And it's been a curiosity of mine, and very much, how did I get this gift, and how is it that so many people continue to suffer? And I've asked that question over and over, and no amount of my willing, praying, wishing is going to make them, or it's not in my domain. They are going to get an insight. I can do everything I can to hold a space of love and peace and connection, and I can do everything I can to be 100% committed to being in my space of truth when I'm with people. But it's not up to me when people get to wake up.
Yeah.
Knowing that and living from there is where I'm at.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add, Matt or Joe?
Yeah, I was just thinking there was a theme here of, when you're under pressure, that's when you underperform.
Sure.
So what is pressure? If pressure doesn't come from out there, it doesn't come from the screaming parents or the fans. It comes from your thinking in the moment. And when people get that principle, that it's all thought, that's where your experience comes from. I don't know. It's like as a skier, if I'm just enjoying the movement of it, I'm way better. But when I'm competing with someone or trying to really tackle that mountain, that's when I fall. So there's something about pressure, whether you're the coach trying to pressure someone else into changing, or conversely, you just see their unlimited potential. It's freeing. It's like sunlight instead of darkness. So it's a whole, taking the pressure out of sports.
Sure.
But still being extraordinarily competitive with no pressure can totally change the dynamic or the performance. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts, but first, Mary, you have your hand up.
I just want to say thank you, Denise. That was really helpful, because that was it. The suffering. I work with a lot of people around physical health, and so the physical health suffering pulls me in, and my habit of 30 years as a healthcare provider, whose job it was to lessen suffering, because that was on me, as if I thought that was on me anyways. That's it. So thank you. It's like the suffering's not on me, and the relief of the suffering's not on me. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. I'm enjoying listening. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Very much enjoying listening today. And really what's fun for me is that listening to your stories and your experiences, you are reminding me that, oh, this is working in my life too. I forget that. And so that's a wonderful thing. As far as the athletics go, I'm not a downhill skier, but I'm a lap swimmer. And you know, when the weather's really cold, I don't want to go over to the pool and get my hair wet, you know, and does it fit into my time frame? And you know, my hair will be wet later, and so then I can't go for a walk, blah blah blah. And it's like, will I really be able to stand hanging out in the pool? Well, you know, the beautiful thing is that my body has a habit of getting in the pool and start swimming the laps. And, you know, I get in the flow and I have a wonderful time. And the time, I forget, like you guys say, I stop thinking. And I love that. So you're reminding me, you know, it's one of those things. Once I get out of the way, I wrote down what Matt said. When I do not engage in the noise of my mind, I get to have so much more fun with all this. And the other thing I want to say is that I'm an artist as well. I'm an artist that really doesn't. I have self-doubt about that. Well, in early December, I was going to go to my part-time job, really tired, didn't want to go to the job. Eventually, I was driving to the job. I called in sick. In my mind, I'm taking care of myself. And I had a vision in my mind of a Christmas card I wanted to make a couple nights earlier. So that the art supplies were sitting there on the table. I called in sick on the way to the job. And then I turned around and I came home and it's like, okay, now what do I do with myself? And I looked over at the table and there were the art supplies. I was really tired. I was really crabby. And I got out my supplies and I made a Christmas card that I was really, really happy with. And I even sold some of them, you know, 10 days before Christmas. And I just got in the moment and did the art. And that's what I want to keep working on in my life. And you guys encouraged me. I appreciated your thoughts, Matt. So thank you.
Beautiful, Mary. Thank you.
Okay.
And you've got your hand up.
Well, thanks, Joe. You reminded me of when we were living in that cold environment and I was doing downhill skiing. And it reminded me that the minute I was skiing along and I thought, oh boy, this looks like a hard part, I might fall, down I would go. It was hysterical. I knew exactly when that was going to happen because the minute I put it in my head, down I would go. But Matt, I wanted to ask you as well. I'm aware, and I'm sure you are too, of the rituals that sports people acquire. They had the best game when they wore those socks, that t-shirt, those sneakers, and they will not in any way change from that course. How do we address this?
Well, I guess it depends whether it's a problem for them or not. I mean, I guess at some point, if the socks start smelling, then yeah. But all details come out in the wash, literally, you know, with this understanding, you know, because as soon as they have an insight as to how their mind truly works, then they'll see where their experience is coming from, see that, you know, it couldn't ever be, you know, an inanimate object that makes them perform well, perform badly, or in my case, a fiberglass bar moving by a couple of centimeters, making me feel, you know, anxious and tense. And so this is, you know, this is the missing link to athletic performance. And, you know, and what's fantastic, and Joe kind of pointed to it, is like, you know, you take someone like Usain Bolt, you know, the greatest athlete that's ever lived, and I've never watched him perform, perhaps once when he got disqualified. And he, you know, and he's just thriving, he's just enjoying himself, he's just loving it. You know, so it's, so I think, so in his own way, what I was saying is that there are people that are, you know, we're born with this. we know this whether we're aware of it or not.
Very good.
Thank you. Yeah. Alistair, you have your hand up. We're coming towards the end of our time here, it looks like. So we have about 4 minutes left. So if anybody has a question, ask it after Alistair if we have time.
Hi, very, very insightful. Really enjoyed this session. There was, Joe, one thing you mentioned was pressure. The pressure of the game, or the pressures behind everything. And I want to couple that with what Nikon said. You just know that the other guy is better on the day, or you just know that, it's not your day. And I sometimes play golf stupidly, maybe, but I've always had that pressure in me when I'm in front of the water. And, and I know not to get caught up in my thinking, and I know I'm going to land in the water, and that's the pressure. But I put it more towards my ego. So I'm just like, yeah, it's okay to land in the water. And what happens? I go over the water. So I don't know if you would say pressure and ego is kind of the joined together, maybe in some way, that, the thinking is.
Exactly. Yeah. The only place pressure can happen is through thought. And that's the self that's separated from who we are. It's the illusionary self. As soon as you separate from that infinite capacity, you diminish your performance. Whether it's, for me as a public speaker, the more I have on it to perform, the more I get in my own way. And the more I'm there to just help people and feel so lucky to be doing what I'm doing, I don't get in my own way. It's like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything. And so it's true with sports. I think the thing I love about sports is that it's an instant printout of your thinking. You can't bullshit yourself and say, oh, my mind's totally in the Buddha state now, when you're hitting that ball in the water. You can just tell someone's in their head. They're caught up. You can see it in an athlete. It's so apparent. But you can see it in a singer. You can see it in your mate. You can see it in a child in school that's in their head trying to learn. So that's the gift of the three principles that is just keeps giving and keep changing so many fields one after another. Now athletics, this is the first time we've had this in these podcasts, but the applications are infinite to Sid's discovery, and there is no end to it. And that's why I wrote this book. I really, if the world just understood even a little bit more of where their experience was coming from, they would get new thinking about where we're headed. And that's how we change and evolve and solve problems. So we're really, really lucky. I can't wait to go skiing. I can't. That's all I'm thinking about. When I'm skiing, I'm 4 years old. I'm no longer a 73-year-old guy. I'm just a little boy having fun, and that's what I love about sports. It's just losing my ego and just having fun. So, any other last comments? Blevo, do you have anything you want to say? You're such a jock. I thought you'd be talking. You're muted. Unmute yourself. Keith, unmute yourself. There you go.
If I knew how to use the computer, that would probably help. But so many things have been inspiring, and everything everybody said is all to the same point. And I just wanted to say thank you. But I love the truth that Sydney Banks so keenly isolated into one as one thought. So there are millions of these other trillions, as he said, of these other needless thoughts that cause needless suffering, and one thought that dashes at all, like a house of cards. And it's just great to hear examples of it again in any field. And in my mind, that's a way to identify what does get in the way. It is suffering needlessly, which, by the way, is a title that I want you that I'm writing a book too. That has a great deal of Citibank's writings in it. He gave this book to me before he passed away, and so suffering needlessly is the title, and I got it from his endorsement for this book. So it's just fascinating to see the potential of the elimination of suffering needlessly, and how that robs us of resilience and performance and parenting, and in so many different ways. And now we know exactly what to communicate about that, which is just incredible. Thank you to everybody.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
And can you unmute everybody? Are we all unmuted? So thank you everybody for attending, and next month it'll just be me answering people.
Everyone can unmute themselves, just so you know. Sorry.
Everybody unmute yourself if you're not, but I'll be just questions and answers with Joe. So it'll be a time just to interview me about what's happening around the book, and there's a lot happening. It's thrilling to me to see how this is getting out to the world and helping so many people. So thank you all for being a part of this. Love you all.